Hello, I'm Armenian-Azerbaijani. Welcome on board the Eastern Express, and as always, I hope you enjoy the journey ahead. On this episode, we turn our attention to the ever-so-glamorous world of international relations and, specifically, the ongoing rollercoaster ride that is the Azerbaijan-Armenia peace process. Because what's more fun than centuries-old territorial disputes and an endless series of negotiations? Am I right? Trust me, if you thought your holiday family dinners were awkward, wait until you get a load of this decades-old saga. So without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
Many hoped that the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan being on speaking terms would lead to some sort of thaw in relations. There had even been reports that a settlement between these two estranged neighbors was finally possible. Now these hopes have been dashed by Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev. In a recent interview, he used the term fascist to describe Armenia 10 times. He also had this to say.
We want peace. But independent Armenia is a fascist state at its core. Fascism must be destroyed by the Armenian leadership or we will do it ourselves.
Aliyev's comments come at a turbulent time for his country. He is currently in a dispute with Azerbaijan's most powerful ally, Russia. The issue concerns an Azerbaijani civilian aircraft crash in which Moscow was allegedly involved. And, as Azerbaijan is struggling with its relationship with Russia, observers note that it probably isn't too pleased with the overtures Armenia has been making towards the West. Armenia has passed a law which would allow it to kick off EU accession talks. This process, however, would have to be agreed upon by the country's people in a referendum.
Adoption of the law doesn't mean Armenian EU membership, because this cannot be reached just like that, and this decision cannot be made even by the government itself.
Relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan were already tense in the wake of the Soviet Union's dissolution. They collapsed, however, in September 2023 when Azerbaijan launched a lightning-fast offensive into the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region, capturing it. This led to thousands of ethnic Armenians fleeing the area and putting a strain on Armenia's economy. Given that Russian peacekeepers had done nothing to prevent the situation, Yerevan has also been distancing itself from Moscow and Russian-led organizations.
And now, as always, it's time to explore the issue in greater detail. For those of you who haven't been following Caucasian geopolitics lately, here is the quick version. Armenia and Azerbaijan had been locked in a decades-long conflict over the Nagorno-Karabakh region, which both sides claim as historically theirs. This conflict included full-scale wars, sporadic skirmishes, and just enough near-peace breakthroughs to keep everyone's hopes up, only to have it all fall apart faster than a dollar store piñata when someone actually tries to whack it. In other words, it is complicated. It was the region's on-again, off-again relationship from hell, where short-lived truces are often followed by new tensions and finger-pointing. I'm saying all of that in the past tense, as the dispute essentially came to a close after Azerbaijan led a swift military campaign against the Armenian enclave. After almost a year of blockade, almost all of the 120,000 ethnic Armenians were effectively expelled. According to recent reports, the Armenian-Azerbaijani peace process has yet again hit a pothole. Now, if you've ever driven in a place where the roads are so poorly maintained, you swear you're part of a lunar expedition. You know, potholes are no joke. This particular pothole, though, is less of a jolt to your suspension and more of a loud thump to any optimism that these two countries might finally sign on the dotted line. The disagreement has to do with corridors, routes, and who gets to move what through which territory. The new stumbling block revolves around control over the Lachin Corridor, a key roadway connecting Nagorno-Karabakh with Armenia. This corridor has become a focal point for humanitarian issues, trade routes, and, of course, symbolic sovereignty. Azerbaijan has ramped up its presence in the area, and Armenia isn't too thrilled about that. if your eyes are already glazing over from the mention of negotiations and corridors, hold on to your seat, because we're about to get even more into the bureaucratic weeds, if you will. Essentially, both sides accuse each other of not following through on previous agreements. Armenia says Azerbaijan's increased military checkpoints and intermittent blockades are hampering free movement, exacerbating humanitarian concerns and, frankly, rattling everyone's nerves, alternatively, rustling everyone's jimmies. Azerbaijan counters that, is merely enforcing its territorial integrity and is open to peace, provided it's on the terms they consider fair. Now, you might be thinking, surely there must be big picture solution out there. And in theory, yeah, that is right. Peace deals have been floated on multiple occasions, but each time something or someone steps in to derail the momentum. Will we see a new set of peace talks that restore hope for the region? Your guess is as good as mine. But if one thing is certain, it's that this conflict can't be solved with a quick handshake and a photo op. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Sultan Zahidov from the Center of Analysis of International Relations. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me.
So what do you make of Ilham Aliyev's latest verbal barrage directed at Armenia? It came at an unusual time, and some people say it may actually make the process of procuring a peace deal more difficult.
Well, actually, there are plenty of facts which can substantiate the fascist nature of Armenian state, taking into consideration the Miatsum movement, which started in Armenia in 1980s, which was about committing ethnic cleansing against Azerbaijanis in Armenia and also in Karabakh. Secondly, what was done against Azerbaijanis during the course of the First Karabakh War, when Armenian occupying forces were deliberately trying to commit ethnic cleansing against Azerbaijanis. They were trying to raze to the ground Azerbaijani cities in order to sweep the relics of Azerbaijani culture and history in those territories. And all these facts, alongside the massive deportations committed against Azerbaijanis in the late 1980s, once again indicate the fact that Armenian state was shaped actually on the footholds of such ideas as Miatsum, Greater Armenia, and the idea of Armenia is for Armenians. And if you look at the declarations, statements made by the presidents of Armenia in the past, once again we will draw a conclusion that the Armenian political establishment has been actively advocating the idea of Armenian nationalism. For example, in the late December, a bombshell revelation happened when a video of first Armenian president Levon Ter-Petrosyan leaked, and the video became public. And in that video, the first president Levon Ter-Petrosyan openly says that Armenia, together with Nagorno-Karabakh, solved a 600-years-old problem by completely cleansing Armenian territories of other ethnicities, which means of Azerbaijanis. And he praised, in that video, he praised the so-called heroism of Armenian soldiers, of the members of Yerpraka, which directly participated in this ethnic cleansing.
Well,
and
do you think that this, because of course,
shows this,
if I may, there is going to be accusations on
Armenian
both
leadership
sides.
at that time advocated such ideas.
Yes, I mean, Armenia insists that the situation that happened later on in Nagorno-Karabakh, which of course from the standpoint of international law was a part of Azerbaijan, but they insist this was ethnic cleansing because 100,000 people had to evacuate. So these accusations of course are going both ways, and it is frankly not my job to decide who is right on that. But the big question remains, do you think that this is helpful stall towards the process of reconciliation? And also, why are these accusations being brought up at this very moment, when it would seem that there were some initial reports that negotiations are going fairly smoothly, given the complexity of the issues involved?
Well, let me first of all say my remarks with respect to the so-called ethnic cleansing against Armenians after the counter-terroristic measures which were conducted by Azerbaijan in 2023. That time, Azerbaijan state officially invited Armenians to live in Karabakh after accepting Azerbaijani passports and Azerbaijani citizenship. But they refused to do so under the influence of, once again, Armenian nationalistic groupings, Armenian political strata. And with respect to the current peace process, I would like to say that there are certain obstacles to the current peace process. And one of them is with respect to the return of the people who were forcibly driven out of their places. And between 1988 and 89, because of the Miatsu movement, approximately 250,000 Azerbaijanis were forcibly driven out of Armenia. And now those people live in Azerbaijan and they seek for the solution of this problem. On numerous occasions, they have appealed to Armenian state, to Armenian government, in order to address their problems as they want to return. But so far, the government of Armenia has not responded to their calls. But of course, if we see such kind of, let's say, destructive position from Armenian side, then the normalization and the peace process will be unreachable. There are certain positive moments as well. First and foremost, most parts of the draft of the peace treaty have been agreed by the parties. 15 articles out of 17 have been agreed between the parties. This is therefore can be considered as the milestone achievement. But there are certain obstacles, and one of the obstacles is the deployment of, let's say, the third party representatives along the conditional border between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and also the constitution of Armenia, which clearly speaks about the territorial claims of Armenia against Azerbaijan. And unless these these obstacles are addressed, the peace process, let's say, can be seen unreachable. But nevertheless, we have to speak about the positive moments as well. But nevertheless, it's up to Armenia now to let's say, harmonize its position with Azerbaijan and make sure that all the obstacles in the way of achieving peace are overcome.
President Aliyev also made these remarks in apparent reference to Armenia acquiring Western weapons. Do you think it's the case that Armenia has any sort of hostile designs towards Azerbaijan and this is why it's acquiring these weapons? Or is it because Armenia has lost a very unreliable ally, Russia, and now wants to reorient itself because it seeks security against any possible threats? It's not just about the bilateral relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but also the position of Armenia vis-a-vis the entire security environment. So would you support President Aliyev's suggestion that the acquisition of these weapons is in fact a move that could be seen as hostile in any way?
Well, if Armenia had proceeded with the acquisition of arms after the signing of the peace treaty with Azerbaijan, that would seem less problematic for Azerbaijan. But unless the peace treaty is signed and unless Armenia is not constructive and trying to postpone the peace process, Azerbaijan cannot be sure with respect to real intentions of Armenia. Of course, as you already mentioned, there are certain problems with the relations between Armenia and Russia, and Armenia might seek some security guarantees from other parts, but nevertheless, Azerbaijan has witnessed numerous cases of border provocations committed by Armenia in the recent years, and taking into consideration the active phase of militarization happening in Armenia now, Azerbaijan cannot be sure whether those arms acquired by Armenia will not be aimed at Azerbaijan anytime in the future. So
Don't you think it might be
what we also demand from Armenia
question?
to stop this active militarization process as it can undermine the peace process, the entire peace process between the two countries.
Well, but don't you think this might have just been a question of practicality, i.e. They have to make these deals for weapons in advance because it takes time to ensure deliveries, to negotiate the minutiae of these contracts, and they didn't really intend for this to take effect before sealing that peace deal anyway. They just needed to make the deals so that deliveries can start sometime in the future.
But how can Azerbaijan be sure of Armenia's intentions with respect to that? They might be the version which you put forward, but there might be some other versions, including the willing of Armenia to attack Azerbaijan in the future, as well as it happened in the past, as it was Armenia which launched offensive against Azerbaijan in the First Karabakh War, after the First Karabakh War. So therefore, there cannot be real assurances that Armenia's real intentions are not against Azerbaijan. Well, there is this security dilemma concept where when the one state increases its arms, it can lead to the arms race in the region, and in the end, the entire region will be less secure. So therefore, what we want from Armenia is that, first of all, to accelerate the peace process, to give green light to the terms which are underlined on the initial draft of the peace treaty, and also stop the active militarization process, and then, of course, change its constitution, which still has territorial claims against Azerbaijan.
So Sultan Zahidov was our guest today here on TVP World, talking about the complexities of a peace process that it seems is still some way off completion because of certain issues which continue to arise. Thank you very much for joining us here and for sharing your insight.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure for me.
And now we're moving on to Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you absolutely don't want to miss. Serbia has proposed it could host talks between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. This announcement comes despite Belgrade being obligated to arrest Putin should he arrive in the country due to his ICC arrest warrant.
Serbia's President Aleksandar Vučić has shown interest in being the one to host what could be a turning point meeting concerning the war in Ukraine. He would like to invite both Trump and Putin to the negotiating table. There is a problem, however. Serbia is a member state of the International Criminal Court and a signatory of the Rome Statute. The country has legal obligations when it comes to the arrest warrant issued against Vladimir Putin in 2023 by the ICC over the allegations of illegal deportations of children from Ukraine. Serbia has hitherto proclaimed neutrality when it comes to the war. On one hand, it has provided humanitarian aid to Ukraine. On the other, a majority of Serbians, according to polls, oppose sanctions against Russia. This shows that there is a will among the Serbian nation to maintain ties with Russia, despite Belgrade also being a candidate for EU membership.
Kiev says it is gathering useful intel from 2 North Korean prisoners of war. Ukraine is ready to exchange the captured soldiers for its own if Kim Jong-un is able to arrange a prisoner swap.
A representative for Ukraine's military intelligence has told Radio Free Europe that the capture of North Korean troops has given Kiev many useful opportunities. The soldiers are the first ones whose capture has been announced by Ukrainian authorities since the North Koreans joined the war on the side of Russia. According to the representative, the information that can be gathered from the soldiers is not only useful to Ukrainian intelligence, but also as a political tool to shine more light on North Korea's involvement in the conflict. Neither Moscow nor Pyongyang have confirmed the soldiers' capture. In autumn 2024, some 11,000 North Korean troops were reportedly sent to Russia's Kursk region to bolster Russian defenses. Reports indicate that the North Koreans have been suffering heavy casualties as Russia tries to retake the region.
The Kursk region's acting governor has banned his officials from censoring online criticism. From now on, apparently, only comments containing profanities or insults can be deleted.
This is a move quite unusual for Russian authorities. Governor Kinshedin believes that the online comments critical of the authorities' performance can be useful, even if they are unpleasant, and has therefore barred his subordinates from censoring them. This new directive was enacted after displaced Kursk region residents criticized a list of missing persons published by the Russian government. According to independent regional media, many people were unable to find their missing loved ones or relatives on the list, despite having reported their absence to the authorities. Russia's Human Rights Commissioner has admitted that the list contained errors. Kinshedin was appointed by Vladimir Putin as Kursk's acting governor just last month. He has said that officials' performance will be evaluated on a monthly basis and that these evaluations would include social media activity.
Trade between Russia and China hit a record high level in 2024. Despite Western sanctions on Moscow in the wake of its invasion of Ukraine, relations between Russia and China seem to be blooming like never before.
The total value of trade between Moscow and Beijing last year amounted to just shy of $245 billion. This is a very small increase over the $240 billion in 2023. Although trade itself is seeing an all-time high, the year-on-year growth rate has slowed down considerably when compared to the 26.3% surge in 2023. Russia and China have not been working closely just economically since the invasion either. The two countries have also been supporting each other politically and have taken part in several joint military drills. Chinese President Xi Jinping himself emphasized how close this relationship has become in a New Year's message to Vladimir Putin. Meanwhile, President-elect Donald Trump, who had imposed serious tariffs on China during his first term, has pledged to impose even tougher trade policies once he takes office later this month.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.